Welcome to another edition of Daily Airline News, focusing on the loss of Air India Flight 171. I am Jeffrey Thomas, and I'm delighted to say, joined by my co-host Richard Godfrey in Frankfurt. Good morning to you, Richard.
And good afternoon to you, Jeffrey.
It's a great afternoon here in Perth, Western Australia. Viewers, this episode is called Starting from Scratch. It's episode 244. Air India has decided to overhaul and refit its entire fleet of 26 Boeing 787-8 aircraft in a $400 million deal. They are effectively starting again from scratch. The first aircraft, VT-ANB, left for Victorville, California on the 23rd of July 2025. The second, VT-ANP, left for Victorville on the 1st of October 2025. Both should be back in service by mid-December 2025. It'll take until mid-2027 for all aircraft to go through the refit program. We have covered the last year of maintenance activities of the Air India 787-8 fleet in depth. And in episode 242, we did a deep dive into the maintenance history of VT-ANB, the crash aircraft. Viewers were shocked to hear our findings of delays, cancellations, diversions, whistleblowers, maintenance overdue, maintenance repeated, maintenance records manipulated, and no wonder there were many passenger complaints. On the 31st of July 2025, Lantan Flight 603 declares an emergency at LAX with a RAT deployment. On the 4th of October 2025, Air India Flight 117 lands at Birmingham with a RAT deployed. India's aviation regulator, the DGCA, has asked Air India to inspect the RAT on some Boeing 787 aircraft after the system unexpectedly deployed in another separate incident. DGCA also asked Boeing to report on all other incidents where the RAT unexpectedly deployed in two separate incidents. Now, before I ask Richard regarding the connections between the RAT deployments, viewers, please subscribe to us, please like us, please do join us, please keep those wonderful comments coming and those great questions. And the subscription is really important because we've got MH370 search resuming in November. But back to Air India 171 and the RAT issues. Richard, is there any connection between the RAT deployments?
Well, this is a fascinating question. There have been 3 RAT deployments in total. So the first one on the 12th of June with the crash aircraft VT-ANB. That was built back in December 2013, and the serial number 36279. The next incident on the 31st of July with LA 603, that's registration CCBBI, and that was built in September 2014. A little bit later, the serial number 38480. And now on the 4th of October, AI 117 at Birmingham, VT-ANO, that was built in June 2013, the serial number 36286. From the serial numbers, you can see these 3 aircraft were not of the same batch, but there might be a link between VT-ANB and VT-ANO. The DGCA has issued a directive to Air India to inspect the RAT and the related systems on Boeing 787s, especially on aircraft where the power distribution module was recently replaced. So they're obviously thinking there might be a connection, and if not with the RAT specifically, with the power distribution module. And DGCA has also requested Boeing to report all other incidents of uncommanded RAT deployment on 787s globally and to propose preventative measures. And the fact that the DGCA has ordered these checks on other Air India 787s and asked Boeing for a full list is, of course, something that sounds quite serious. And when a regulator does that, then it's not just all a particular aircraft, the crash aircraft. They're now talking about all aircraft in their national fleet. And they're also interested in all global incidents from Boeing of a similar nature. It means that they potentially see a systemic issue rather than an isolated fault.
Yeah. Is there a systemic issue with the 787, though?
Well, it's certainly a notable escalation from the DGCA. And normally, if the cause was known, then Boeing would issue a service bulletin or a flight operations technical bulletin. And DGCA would simply mandate its compliance. The DGCA's recent actions strongly suggest that it does not have a firm final view of the root cause of the Air India crash on the 12th of June. It would appear that DGCA India is considering the case of a systemic Boeing issue. It is important to understand, however, the role of the regulator, the investigators, the manufacturers, and the operators. ICAO state the Accident Investigation Authority shall be independent in its organization and functionally separate from the state aviation authorities and other entities that could interfere with the conduct or objectivity of an investigation. And you have to ask the question why the DGCA is taking the lead in this issue and not the AAIB investigators. AAIB India is not the regulator, and the DGCA is not the investigator. But the DGCA does have three members on the AAIB investigation team who are employees of the DGCA and not the AAIB. So, as we pointed out, there is a conflict of interest. And according to the ICAO guidelines, an investigation has to be independent of the regulator. I would conclude that if there is a systemic issue with the Boeing 787, then Boeing would have issued a service bulletin, or the FAA would have issued an airworthiness directive, but they haven't. And when you consider the UK AAIB, the US NTSB, and BEA in France, they all ensure that their regulators, the CAA, FAA, or DGASAC, stay out of active investigations.
So, Richard, let me rephrase my question then. Is there a systemic issue with Air India 787s?
Well, we're showing a screenshot, which we've put up before, on the Air India Boeing 787-8 fleet maintenance overview. 18 aircraft, including the crash aircraft VT-ANB and the RAT deployment incident aircraft VT-ANO, have been in heavy maintenance in the last year. In fact, VT-ANO, the aircraft involved in the RAT deployment at Birmingham, left for heavy maintenance in Abu Dhabi on the 11th of June, the day before the crash of VT-ANB. In December 2022, Air India announced that it would refurbish its entire legacy wide-body fleet, comprising 27 Boeing 787-8 and 13 Boeing 777s, and committing over $400 million for cabin interior and avionics system upgrade. In September 2024, Air India publicly launched a cabin retrofit and refit program covering 67 aircraft. And this now included 27 narrow body A320neos and 40 wide body Boeing aircraft. And that is all tied to this $400 million outlay. The retrofit program was launched starting with the A320neo fleet. And the retrofit program is not just a cabin interior overhaul, it is an upgrade of the avionics systems. India described the wide body retrofit program as a reliability enhancement program, under which it will be upgrading the avionics and other critical systems of its legacy 787-8 fleet to the latest industry standards, quote. And I think this is tacit admission that Air India recognized they had a systemic issue. And the fleet showed recurring dispatch reliability and component performance deficiencies.
Indeed. Now, Richard, we did a deep dive into the crash aircraft VT-ANB over the last 3 years. You have now completed a deep dive into VT-ANO, the RAT incident aircraft, over the last 3 years. So can you tell the viewers, what did you find out about VT-ANO?
Yeah, we're showing a screenshot comparing the findings on VT-ANO with the findings on VT-ANB over the last 3 years. The aircraft both have a similar age and operated a similar number of flights in the last 3 years. VT-ANB experienced, however, significantly more delays and cancellations. Both aircraft had the same number of planned maintenance line checks. VT-ANB had double the number of unplanned corrective maintenance sessions compared to VT-ANO. And there is also a striking difference between the two aircraft in terms of the so-called base checks. VT-ANB underwent a C check in Mumbai starting on the 26th of June 2023 and lasted 33 days. VT-ANO underwent two C or D checks. One started on the 16th of November 2022, that's the 9-year C check, lasting 29 days in Mumbai. And another started on the 11th of June 2025, and that was the 12-year D check, but it was brought forward in time. And that lasted 64 days at Etihad Engineering in Abu Dhabi. And Flight Radar 24 confirms the flight on the 16th of November 2022 from Delhi to Mumbai, and then no flights for the 29 days thereafter, as well as the flight on the 11th of June to Abu Dhabi, and no flights for the 64 days thereafter. So I think that tells a very interesting story.
The VT-ANO 12-year heavy maintenance was technically not due until the 4th of October this year, plus or minus a month. Was it brought forward 4 months because of early recognition of wear, aging effects, or deferred maintenance risks, in your view?
Well, that's quite possible. But another reason it might have been brought forward is simply because of the October slot for the retrofit program for VT-ANB. And Air India wanted ANO back in service before ANP went off to Victorville for 10 weeks. The preliminary report confirms the D check for VT-ANB was planned for December 2025, and VT-ANB had double the unplanned maintenance when compared to VT-ANO. And there was apparently no need to bring forward the D check for VT-ANB like they did for ANO. So I think there was no early recognition of wear or aging effects or deferred maintenance risks. In other words, the decision to advance the ANO check was simply logistical and not technical.
Now, Richard, you mentioned that the AAIB is responsible for the investigation into VT-ANB. Why didn't they request data from Boeing on RAC deployments?
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting point. The AAIB did not request Boeing global data because under Annex 13, it had no confirmed technical link between RAT deployment and the crash. The DGCA stepped in because of repeated unmanned RAT deployments that constituted an operational airworthiness issue, and that gave it direct authority to act under continuing airworthiness regulations. The DGCA October 2025 action was triggered not by the crash data directly, but by the subsequent uncommanded RAT deployment on other aircraft, and particularly the VT-ANO in the 4th of October. This meant the issue has now become a current airworthiness concern across the active fleet, not merely an investigation data point. The AAIB cannot directly compel Boeing to provide global fleet data. It must request it through the NTSB, which in turn coordinates with Boeing under the US regulations. And such a request requires a clear causal hypothesis linking the system to the crash. And evidently, they didn't have that. So the DGCA stepped in.
Okay. So, how do you summarise the Air India Boeing 787 fleet maintenance issues?
Well, on one level, they are logistical issues resulting from aircraft availability, utilization, maintenance, and retrofit. But then there are a level of technical issues resulting from the number and the complexity of unplanned maintenance sessions. Then, of course, most importantly, there are safety concerns resulting from the deferred maintenance backlog and India's systemic issues across the whole fleet. Then there is the question of whether there's a Boeing systemic issue across the global fleet. And finally, there are reputation issues for Air India, where many passenger complaints, booking levels are of concern, and they want, of course, repeat business. And finally, a large number of staff are calling in sick. Flight crew, cabin crew, engineers, ground handling, and others. On the 16th of June, just 4 days after the accident, 112 pilots called in sick, 51 captains and 61 first officers. And that is according to a government statement in the Indian Parliament.
So, this begs the question, Richard, how can Air India recover and move forward?
Well, in my view, they number one need to stabilize the schedule and to protect their core business. Number two, close the safety loop and do that fast and make sure there are no loose ends. And number three, the crew readiness and fatigue mitigation. They need to protect the people who actually fly. And number four, a customer trust campaign. And I think transparency is the key word. Maintenance outsourcing, stabilized using partnerships with Singapore, Etihad, Aramco, and others. And then they are doing maintenance insourcing. They're building the capability and not just buying it in. And finally, I think data discipline. You can't manage what you don't measure. And, or to put it in medical terms, there is no treatment without a proper diagnosis.
Mm. It's almost as though they should put the brakes on their expansion program and take a breather for 6 months and get everything stabilized before they resume.
Yeah, the expansion program is frightening if they just pile it in on top of the issues that they currently have.
Mm.
And I think you're quite right. They should first stabilize before they then go into a very significant expansion.
In fact, as they get delivered new aircraft, they shouldn't expand. They should take out of service some of their fleet and accelerate the overhaul maintenance program, refit program, and prioritise that. So yeah, it's a big, complex, very complex issue that they've undertaken, and it's possibly time to take a slight breather.
Yeah, I think they need a breather. And when you consider the retrofit program will take 2 years, it'll take 2 years to build the MRO facility in Bengaluru. You can't solve these kind of issues overnight. And
No.
if you then start taking delivery of new aircraft from Airbus and from Boeing, and you haven't solved the fundamental problems
Mm.
of the crew and the training and the fatigue mitigation and the maintenance and so on, then you're just asking for more trouble, aren't you?
You are indeed. Yeah. So, Richard, thank you very much indeed for the analysis today. It's really quite extraordinary, isn't it?
It is, on one hand, frightening, but on the other hand, it is something that has to be tackled and dealt with very carefully.
Yeah. So, thank you once again.
You're welcome.
And viewers, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow looking at further dynamics of the Air India 171 crash. So please do tune in tomorrow. Please subscribe to us. Please like us. Please do join us, join our community. Keep those wonderful comments coming and those great questions. As I said many times, we do read them. I can promise you we read them all, and we do appreciate them, and we do appreciate your support. And we look forward to your company tomorrow. Thank you very much.